In the summer of 2025, India's economic performance looked unassailable. This chart tracks global GDP, and as you can see, between April and June, India hit a 7.8% growth rate, vastly outpacing other major economies and securing its title as the world's fastest-growing major economy. But in the exact same week that growth data made headlines, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation quietly published a report tracking the country's massive informal sector. That data showed an immediate contraction. While the top-line GDP was surging, the number of jobs in informal manufacturing plummeted. In just 3 months, the sector dropped from 131.3 million workers down to 128.6 million. That is 2.7 million people losing their jobs, a 9.3% collapse in a single quarter. The celebrated 7.8% growth figure acts as a statistical smokescreen. Because it focuses heavily on formal corporate metrics, it masks a severe hollowing out of the actual labor force, the everyday workers who make up the backbone of the country. Take Outpaces. A few years ago, he moved from a village in Gujarat to Surat, the world's largest diamond hub. He secured a factory job, and his salary eventually reached 35,000 rupees a month. For Outpaces, that was financial stability. It meant he could finally enroll his 2 daughters in an English medium private school. Then the diamond market stalled. His salary was quickly cut to 18,000 rupees, and a few months later, his factory fired 60. He is what it looks like when millions of jobs vanish in the span of 3 months. Those factory closures were triggered by events outside the country. In late 2025, the US government imposed 50% tariffs on Indian exports and forced India to halt its purchases of Russian oil. Those tariffs hit domestic manufacturing hubs immediately. In Tirupur, a major garment export center, producers suddenly faced a combined US duty of 64%. Meanwhile, their competitors in Bangladesh were paying duties of around 35%. With prices artificially inflated, international orders vanished. Exporters calculated that up to 150,000 workers in Tirupur alone faced imminent job loss. The diamond industry in Surat was squeezed from both sides. They were starved of the raw diamonds they typically imported from Russia, while their finished stones were hit by the new American tariffs. The entire processing chain seized up. In Surat, 400,000 diamond workers either had their pay slashed or lost their jobs entirely. Over the next year, roughly 50,000 workers packed up and returned to their home villages. India's domestic employment is so deeply tied to global supply chains that local workers are highly vulnerable to conflicts and policy shifts happening thousands of miles away. A third major shock followed in early 2026. The Iran war led to the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway through which India imports 55% of its oil. Crude prices spiked by 58% and fertilizer by 66%. While the official inflation rate remained under 4%, that average ignores the ground reality for the working class. When a domestic gas cylinder that once cost under 1,000 rupees starts selling for 2,500 on the black market, the effective inflation rate for low-income earners hits roughly 60%. We can see this squeeze clearly by looking at purchasing power. This chart shows nominal salaries rising, but look at the inflation-adjusted salary line. When you account for the rising cost of basic goods, the real value of an average worker's paycheck steadily drops, falling from 12,100 rupees in 2012 to just 10,925 rupees. Millions of jobs are disappearing, and real wages have been falling for a decade, yet retail demand remains high. People are still buying phones, air conditioners, and cars at an aggressive rate. Data from the Reserve Bank of India reveals that most of these purchases are being funded through a spike in non-housing retail loans. Credit card EMIs and personal loans have driven Indian household debt to a record high of 41.3% of the total GDP. The visible prosperity in the market is an illusion. People are not spending saved wealth. They are taking on high-interest debt just to maintain their standard of living and fund their basic survival. In times of crisis, standard economic theory dictates that the government should step in. The state is supposed to open its treasury, offer stimulus, and create public work programs to catch the people falling out of the private sector. That intervention is currently impossible. Over the last decade, total central and state debt ballooned from 62 trillion rupees to over 197 trillion. As you can see on this gauge, that pushes India's debt-to-GDP ratio to roughly 82%. Economists generally advise developing nations to keep this ratio below 40%. A quarter of all government revenue goes directly toward paying the interest on old bills. When you add in fixed costs like state salaries, pensions, and existing subsidies, over 80% of the government's total income is already spent. The national treasury is effectively empty. The state is financially paralyzed, leaving it unable to deploy a safety net or protect its citizens from economic ruin. Technological displacement is the next immediate threat. Artificial intelligence and automation are now learning to execute complex tasks, replacing the need for human labor across vast sections of the economy. The World Economic Forum and industry experts warn that the Indian IT sector is uniquely exposed. Over the next 2 to 3 years, an estimated 400,000 to 500,000 technical and service jobs are in direct danger of being automated away. At the same time, environmental patterns point to the arrival of a severe El Niño weather system. Historically, this brings devastating droughts that heavily damage crop yields, directly decimating rural agricultural employment. The fastest-growing economy is a debt-fueled mirage. With real wages dropping and the government treasury drained, the average Indian worker has zero economic buffer left. They are standing defenseless against the technological and environmental shocks that are already arriving.